Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode 22 of the 30 most important albums in the history of hard rock and heavy metal. 30 days of November, 30 albums that I feel are some of the most influential albums that help shape what we normally think of as hard rock and heavy metal these days, right? A lot of people commenting that, Pete, but you missed out on this album from this year, or what about this album, or how about those other couple of bands from the band you mentioned already? It's like, well, first, a couple things. If I were to do like multiple albums from certain bands, there are certain bands that would fill up like 3/4 of the 30 days. So while I love Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and, a host of other bands, yes, I realize they have lots of great albums that were all influential. You can't mention them all. So everybody gets one day. That's it. One appearance. Because otherwise, we would have 30 albums and 20 of them would be Sabbath, Zeppelin, Purple, Heap, and a couple others, right? Can't do that. So Judas Priest, or example, right? So I've decided to just keep it at one band. Because it's got to be fair, got to include as much as we can. But in addition, some people that want more albums from the 60s and the early 70s. Some people, they want all this new stuff, right? So I'm picking the albums that I feel influenced so many bands going forward. So the bulk of what you're seeing is from the 60s and 70s. We're going to go into the 80s very soon. We're going to touch a little bit on the 90s. But, I'm going with the true originators, the real driving forces of what we know as hard rock and metal. And again, these are all the albums that I feel, right? You're free to think differently, and that's quite all right. And it's hard because there's a lot. There's so many that I could include, but I had to pick the 30 that I feel are the most important. So if you don't see some of your favorites, doesn't mean I don't like them, doesn't mean I don't feel they're important. I picked the 30 that I feel are the ones most deserving. From my list, anyway. You, like I said, you can put your lists together and however you like, and the ones you feel are the most important, that's totally cool, because we all have different opinions on these things. So today, this particular one released May 14th, 1976. All right, this is an American band. Not a ton of American bands in my list. There's been a few, but for the most part, we got a lot of British bands. Just the way it goes, right? I think some of the most important bands in this style of heavy rock were, European or British bands. It's kind of the way it worked. But there were a decent amount of American bands. I've done a couple. I'm going to have a couple more coming. So this particular one came out on the Columbia Records label, like I said, May 14th, 1976, produced by Jack Douglas. Of course, I'm talking about the fourth studio album from Aerosmith called Rocks. Most serious fans of Aerosmith usually cite this as their best album. This was, a good seller for the band, contained a couple of their, really, really memorable songs. You could argue that Toys in the Attic, you could argue the first album, you could argue Get Your Wings, right? I'm tending to go with the one that, you hear most bands talking about, you hear most critics talking about, and also my personal favorite. I will say I love Toys in the Attic quite a bit. Get Your Wings ranks right up there for me too, but, this is probably their heaviest album. This has got, it doesn't get much better than the three openers, right? Back in the Saddle, Last Child, and Rats in the Cellar. Greatness right there. You can't tell me that so many bands in the 80s, Guns N' Roses, Cinderella, Motley Crue, so many of these, the bands, which we call like kind of hair metal, right? But, those kind of more commercial hard rock bands of the 80s, so many of them. This is where it all came from right here. Aerosmith, they all worshipped Aerosmith. Combination, another great song. So many great raunchy riffs on here from, Tipton, what am I talking about? From Joe Perry and Brad Whitford. Totally thinking of another band here. So many great riffs and solos on here. Just the attitude. Steven Tyler's vocals. The great groove-laden rhythms, right? Sick as a Dog. Nobody's Fault. Classic songs here. Get the Let Out. Lickin' a Promise. Home Tonight. It's just like one raunchy, bluesy, heavy rock song after another. It's like these guys, for me, and they took their influences from, the old blues greats as well as the British, the kings of the British hard rock scene or the rock scene. It's almost like they, took like the framework. I always kind of compared Aerosmith. They were like the hard rock equivalent of the Stones. because they had that kind of like raunchy, just we don't give a shit at swagger and attitude that we're going to do whatever the hell we want. We're going to look however the hell we want. And there's like a griminess to Aerosmith's music that I think I always kind of compared to the Stones, but they're two totally different entities, right? But it's that attitude that I always kind of really liked. And I think that's what gives the Aerosmith records, especially the '70s albums, there's a grit to them that's not on a lot of their later stuff, and I think so many bands love that about them and tried to replicate that, especially in the '80s. So yeah, Rocks. Extremely important album, I think, to hard rock and metal. In my opinion, Aerosmith were never a metal band, but they had some pretty heavy stuff. But more importantly, just that kind of raunchiness of their music, that rawness, was so important to so many hard rock bands going forward that you absolutely have to include them here. So yeah, Rocks from 1976, May 14th, Columbia Records, produced by Jack Douglas. That is my pick for today. Down in the comments below, talk about your love for Aerosmith or not your love for Aerosmith in this particular album. This is on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Thanks for watching this episode of the 30 most important albums in the history of hard rock and heavy metal. Got another one coming up tomorrow and every day throughout the rest of November, and stay tuned for that and more stuff here on the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content. We've got the link to our Ko-Fi page below for channel donations, as well as the link to our merch page. All sorts of cool stuff for sale. We got a special going throughout this month and next month, so just in time for the holidays. And please go over and click on seaoftranquility.org, our webzine that has been on the internet for 20 years this year. We've got over 23,000 album reviews there, so cool database of all sorts of music stuff. So thanks for watching. I am Pete Pardo. See you later on. Take care. Bye-bye.